In the 1950s, George Reeves embodied the Man of Steel in Superman's first television adaptation, from its gritty black and white beginnings to the kid-friendly color years. To this day, an entire generation reveres George as their Superman, while for others, the show remains an overlooked, underrated chapter in the character's history. On this podcast, we bring everyone together as we break down each episode of Adventures of Superman, examining it within the context of the series itself, as well as the larger Superman mythology. Welcome to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 4, Episode 8, The Wedding of Superman, is Wearing the Cape cosplayer and returning guest, Daniel Sanchez. Welcome back.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on, not just for this episode, but because this was Noelle Neal's favorite episode that she was ever in.
Yes, those were going to be the next words out of my mouth. So you beat me to it. And yes, and I could see why this was such a standout for her and why this is one of the episodes that you wanted to talk about as we get into the color episodes here, the color seasons. Our brief synopsis: Lois, overwhelmed with the paper's lovelorn letters, dreams that Superman finally proposes marriage. This aired May 12th, 1956, written by Jackson Gillis, directed by Philip Ford. We have Milton Fromm as Faraday, the public defender, and Julie Bennett as sometimes Mabel. So before we get into our full breakdown of this episode, overall thoughts, feelings, impressions on this one?
I can 100% understand why this was Noelle Neal's favorite episode. I appreciate it on two levels. The first is it has a very Wizard of Oz quality that we can get into. But if you're a fan of Wizard of Oz, there's a lot to love here. Especially if one of the reasons that you love Wizard of Oz is you really get to know Dorothy and what her hopes and dreams and fears are. Some great parallels in this episode. Secondly is because, wow, I think this is the most live action interpretation accurate version of the Lois that existed in comics at the time.
Yeah.
Where cover after cover after cover had her crying and upset about her unrequited love, and would she ever be able to have this man of her dreams, and the trying, all of those emotions brought to the surface of Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, and even some of the Action Comics themselves. This was almost like they asked Noelle, would you like to take a huge swing at being that? And wow, did she knock it out of the park.
Yeah, 100%. I'm always there for it when we really get to spotlight one of the supporting cast members. So I love the spotlight for her. Your point about it being right out of the comics is spot on. It's one of those things. If we had a 1950s Superman series and they never did something like this, you would have really felt like, man, they left something on the table here. So there's that. And then I think for me, though, the biggest reason why this one stands out so much is that it's such a rare instance on the show of just even touching on the idea of romance. And so I love that it's explored, even just to the extent that it is here. Of course, it's all a dream and whatnot, but even to just broach that subject, I was very pleased. And look, a child of the post-crisis era, right? I grew up with Lois and Clark in a relationship, engaged, married, and it's one of those things. And now, of course, we've seen that play out in numerous other media as well. And I'm so at home, and I love that relationship and everything that it can open up to both of the characters. So just to see that touched on here was amazing.
It really was. And we have a similar history for once. My age doesn't exclude me from being on the cool Anthony team here. In 1978 in the comics, they were married, legitimately married, no dream sequence, no takesy backsies. Action Comics 484 with cover art by Jose Garcia Lopez, was a direct nod and tribute and acknowledgement of the Adventures of Superman. They begin opening page, written by Cary Bates, with the narrative intro from the show. and they trail it off into the beginning of the story. When I looked into that, Carrie said that this is not a trick because ultimately it ended up being the Earth 2 Superman.
Right.
And that is very, very real and continued on until Crisis of Infinite Earth. So it lasted from 78 to what, 85? And Carrie said, this is the Adventures of Superman, Superman. And it is also the Action #1 Superman. So that particular version got his happy ending. The Clark in Action Comics #1 that could not get Lois's attention if he lifted the car up and tossed her out of it ultimately got his happy ending with that Lois. And this episode is right in that continuity. So I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, I have read that issue before. I do want to take another look at it now after rewatching this episode. But yeah, it was great. And yes, they had their send off in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Of course, that wouldn't be the end of the story by the time Infinite Crisis rolled around. I don't know how you feel about that, but
well, I think there's a point in the story where you can say, I'll leave it there.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll get into our breakdown here. Lois breaks the fourth wall to introduce herself and her story, an important one, her own. She barges into Perry's office and refuses to leave, but he's about to hold a conference with Superman, Inspector Henderson, and Public Defender Faraday about a crime wave orchestrated by the mysterious Big Man. So what did you think of this opening? This was an outlier in terms of Lois talking directly to the camera, to the audience.
I loved it. I thought this sets a whole new, almost like a one-shot feel of whatever's happening here seems different and special, and therefore I'm interested.
Yes, for sure. When we get into Perry's office, a few interesting things here, both in what I just said and then what's still to come. The moment between Henderson and Lois was odd to me, right? Because Perry says, like, oh, Inspector Henderson, and he stands up and he's like, oh, yes, we're old friends. Good ones, too, I hope. And it was just funny to me. We're in season 4. You would think we were beyond like anything in the realm of even bordering on an introduction. Now, Faraday, on the other hand, we got to set up who that guy is. But it was just funny to me with Henderson.
Yeah, it's not the first time Lois has walked in a room and Henderson's been there. Why Perry introduced him, it seemed there just so that Henderson could go, well, hello.
Yes, and set up for when we get to later in the dream and his whole line about her being out of circulation. I get it, but it was just funny to me. It's like season 4. We all know each other at this point. Well, anyway, we continue in the office here. After their conference, Lois pleads for help, and while everyone is initially quick to be her hero, they all quickly turn dismissive when she reveals her problem. Perry asked her to fill in for the editor of the advice column, and she's overwhelmed by the volume and the emotion of all the lovelorn letters she's been reading. She even asks Superman to help her go through the letters, but he says maybe some other time, and practically runs away when Lois asks if he's even interested in love. Perry chastises her for bothering Superman, and Lois returns to her office dejected. What did you make of this turn in this scene here?
It took a second to get used to it because I'm not, by this season, not at all used to Lois being overwhelmed by just taking over for someone else while they're on vacation at the Daily Planet. I mean, for her to come in halfway in tears already and then to leave in full tears was very unlike the Lois that we had come to know. So again, it gave me this feel of this is a one-shot episode, but it did harken back to my memory of the end of Around the World with Superman, where in that episode, they help reunite a family with their daughter, and Lois turns to Superman and implies, wouldn't you like something like this? And he gets flustered and does not say anything helpful and then bails. It just sort of dashes away. So you get that exact same reaction here, which I think just sets up the obstacle that Lois has to even broach the subject with him, because now she's over 2.
Yes, no, and I'm glad you brought up Around the World with Superman because definitely echoes of that. I mean, a few things here. One, yeah, I mean, I agree with you about how overwhelmed she seems to get so quickly. It's next to impossible to imagine the Phyllis Coates version of Lois from season one, like in this situation.
No.
However, and yes, this feels very much a product of its time and all that. But I like the fact that it's not like Lois was reassigned per se. Like she's still on her regular beat, but she's filling in, so it's a temporary thing. And in fairness to the show and to the character here, yes, it's the volume of letters. Like it's a lot for her to get through, but it's also that she's overwhelmed by the emotion. Like she's reading all of this heartbreak and it's registering with her. And so I like that it wasn't just one thing or the other. It's the volume, but it's also the emotion of it. I what struck me most about the scene was how the men turn, and it was really not a good look for them, especially Superman. This really kind of bugged me. But there was a very humorous moment before that when they are first quick to want to help her, right? Because they don't know what it's about yet. And I love, I love Henderson. He's like, "What are the letters about? Are they Are they complaining about the police?"
Mhm.
Very self-interested there, but I love that. Made me laugh. But when she explains what it is, and they all essentially laugh. One thing for Faraday, one thing for Henderson, one thing for Perry, but I wanted a little bit more from Superman here. And when she goes over and asks for his help. I mean, yeah, is it a bit ridiculous that Superman would sit down and read letters with her at super speed? Maybe. But I just would have appreciated if he had played it more as I have to go. There's something urgent, as opposed to maybe some other time. Like clearly he doesn't want to do this.
Mhm.
I just didn't love the way that played. I do like, though, that she at least asked, "Aren't you even interested in love?" I wish
Mhm.
we had gotten an answer from him. I mean, when we get later into the episode and we get to the dream portion of it, she will say to him, "Why did you never say these things to me before?" And he's like, "Well, I was so busy," which is fine. And I guess we can kind of fill in the blank for why the show doesn't go there with the romance. If we're looking for kind of an in-story explanation for it, where yes, he is busy. He doesn't want to put her at risk, whatnot. But I don't know. I guess at some point in the show's run, I would have liked a more explicit, specific accounting for this, for why this is not something that he feels he can entertain. I mean, again, we have answers we can fill in or we can pull from somewhere else, but I wish the show had been a little bit more explicit about that.
That would have been wonderful, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons that there's an audience for the Christopher Reeve movies, because it did acknowledge that,
Yeah.
where he did not want a life of solitude, and he wanted to be connected and have love and have what everyone else got to have, you know. And if you go back to Clark on Smallville, they touch on that all the time. And that was actually, I would say, one of Tom Welling's strengths, is when they would hit those episodes of the longing to have what he, by virtue of his powers, had to deny himself, but he longed for it. Here, George Reeves won't even talk about it, think about it. It's a complete other end of the spectrum for that Superman.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, and I do get if, because of the times or for any other reason, they were never going to actually develop a romance. That's one thing. But yeah, like I said, I just wish that it had been explained, addressed at some point in time, because yes, of course, I have these other visions or versions of the character in my mind, like you just laid out, but also just even in the context of this show, Clark lives a pretty full life. I always joke about him going out to the Tip Top Club and whatnot, but beyond that, like he plays darts with Henderson and they make bets and they go out for steak dinners and stuff like that. Like he socializes, he has a life. So it's like, it would be perfectly natural for this to be something he would be interested in. And like I said, it just would have been nice if this had been explored more, but at least we had it here. Now, I will say, even though I don't love the way Superman comes across in that moment with Lois, when we get to the next scene, even though Superman runs away, what's the first thing that he does, right? As Clark, he goes to Lois's office. I mean,
Checks
he ends
in
up
on her.
like teasing, but still he's there. So that kind of absolves him a little bit in my eyes from that scene in the office. But yeah, not a great moment for the men in that one. But
I do have to say I loved the joke that Clark told when he did go in and check in on her, where she she said, does spring not mean anything to you? Do you think spring, and he goes, well, I don't know. I mean, baseball. And she goes, well, do you think spring means anything to Superman? And he goes, well, I don't think he has time for baseball, Lois. And she almost sort of swats at him like an old married couple, like,
Yeah.
just you're no help. Get out of here. But he brought at least some company where you're right. Like he circled right back and came and it was cute. It was very it added some levity in the middle of sort of an early portion of this episode where you're not quite sure what's going on and why does this feel a little off kilter. And then you have Clark and Lois do that and you go, okay, there they are. That's who I'm used to seeing.
Yeah, that little moment went a long way. So I really did enjoy that. And you have Jimmy pouring out a mountain of these letters, and Lois decides she's going to take them home, and she's determined to get through all of them. And that night she falls asleep while reading the letters, and she wakes up to a flower delivery with a note signed by Superman, who promises that he wants to see her and has an important question to ask. At the office, Clark is positively infatuated with Lois, but she dismisses him and Jim to follow a lead. So I guess, well, this is actually a question. I meant to ask you this at the top, but when you initially watched this, I mean, presumably as a kid, I mean, like, did you have a sense that this was going to turn out to be a dream, or at what point did you realize that that might be where this was going?
I was going to ask you the same question, but more in terms of just the viewing audience. At what point did it become sort of a cliche where if somebody starts to fall asleep with a certain thought on their mind, and then they wake up and the room looks entirely normal, at what point do you go, they're dreaming? As a child, I don't think I had seen that happen enough times to get a radar for it. But on rewatch, it is blatant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but to your point, it's like, yeah, if this was not as much of a trope, and especially aimed at a pretty young audience, like I could see, and it's not like it gets so extreme right off the bat. It's believable enough at the beginning where it's like, okay, you can kind of, buy this. So yeah, I mean, but I hear you.
Yeah, I think it was the 50s on television, and I think people just maybe hadn't developed a gotcha on that kind of a thing yet.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. I mean, obviously, certainly we're rewatching this. We know it's a dream, and it's interesting what happens in her dream and what it might reveal about what she actually thinks or feels. I mean, the fact that you have Clark, just again, staring at her in the office there and then remarking about the flower that she has pinned to her. It's like that interest from him, right? That only happens in that way in her dreams is telling.
Oh, this is the meat of it. I mean, once she, quote, wakes up the next morning, this is all the good stuff.
Yeah. Single Bound is a new podcast hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is a regular topic of discussion. Listen and subscribe to Single Bound on Spotify and YouTube. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories? Robbo is that kind of person, and that's exactly what he's doing on a new show called This Podcast Will Never Die. Listen and subscribe today. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Moose has that rare old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. Visit them in Whippany or reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Whether you're an independent filmmaker or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals. Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. If you have children and are looking for a family-friendly store, look no further than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, and check out awyeahcomics.com for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Aw yeah! My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Zach Moore's Always Hold On to Smallville, which continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts. So she takes this call. One of her advice seekers, sometimes Mabel, reveals that she's at her jewelry store, and that her estranged boyfriend is none other than the mysterious Big Man, revealed to us and Lois to be the public defender, Faraday. Clark follows Lois to the jewelry store and changes to Superman, saving her first from a blast, then a round of heavy gunfire. In a very tender moment, he crushes smaller diamonds into a larger one and proposes, which she joyfully accepts. As she caresses his chest, Henderson arrives on the scene and they tell him to beat it, Bill. So yeah, this whole sequence at the jewelry store, the reveal about, well, it's funny, the reveal about Faraday, I mean, had this not been a dream, I mean, that's definitely who Big Man would have been. I feel like that's very similar to what we've seen in other episodes, like Crime Wave, for example.
Right.
Where there it was the district attorney who was the bad guy who was pulling all the strings. But yeah, we get some cool action bits here with him smothering the blast and then taking the hail of gunfire with his arms outstretched in front of her. I feel like that's an image that you see floating around online and whatnot. And then this really, I mean, this probably is my favorite moment of the entire thing. This tenderness between them, because it's instantly we are seeing a different side of the George Reeves version of the character that we have not seen, and it was such a stand. I welcome your thoughts on any of this.
That was television bliss. And the thing that I really, I watched the episode twice to prepare for this, talking to you about it. Both times, what lingered afterwards was, in another reality, we could have had so much more of this. And they gave us magic. Their chemistry, playing to each other of, I'm now finally allowing myself to love you. And her reaction to him was never, I told you so, or finally. It was just sheer love. Nothing unpure, nothing, no baggage, no anything. And you would think that there'd be a little part of Lois of, I've been chasing you for years, but she didn't bring any of that. It was so perfect that it made you think, had the series continued, would we maybe have gotten the two of them like this? And what a loss that we didn't.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that, because that was the main thought I had. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know why couldn't the show have gone down this road? I mean, obviously, given the times, right, we wouldn't, it's not like they're going to be shacking up or we were going to see anything explicit. But had it been a chaste romance and then they get married and whatnot, I mean, that would not have been out of line with other married couples on television, and it would have opened up a whole other dynamic and avenue of storytelling inside of the character. I mean, I just keep going back to this romantic Reeves that we get here. And, it would have been so fascinating to see this play out for any period of time beyond this. I mean, what happens when they have a disagreement? Like there's so much to explore. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what breaks my heart about this episode, is just how fleeting it was, because it was really kind of fascinating to see for the few scenes that we got it.
Absolutely. And when we get to the end and we realize Lois's disappointment that it's not true, in a way, I shared that, because I thought, oh, but I kind of wanted this to be true also. I did really appreciate that one of the first things that happens when Lois, in her dream day, starting in the morning when she wakes up, you get a sense of the things that she cares about in what happens in order during her day. So she doesn't go straight to the crime aspect of it. She, in her dream, goes to work, and then Clark is there, but Clark's just moony-eyed over her, and she's, wearing her nice little flower, and she's all happy, and she's barely listening to Clark because someone, Superman sent her this flower, and Clark is trying to tell her that he has 2 tickets to the ball game. And he's trying to ask her out, which in my recollection is the first time we ever saw George Reeves try to ask Noel Neill out on a date. So here in Lois's subconscious, first, she wants to be acknowledged by Superman. But second, she wanted to be acknowledged by Clark so that he would just walk in the door and ask her out. I found that fascinating. And that was if that had been the only thing that had been fascinating, I would have thought great episode, but it just gave you more and more and more of this insight into who Lois was. But when you think about the beginning of how she was shut out of the boys club, basically, they were there to talk about these crimes and these big things and saving the whole city, and she was told, maybe we'll let you sit quietly while the boys figure this out.
And take
So
notes.
and take notes. So where does her subconscious go next? Well, I'm going to get involved.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be shut out. So it was just, like I said, this is the meat of it. This is where we really get to know what Lois thinks and feels day to day.
Well, speaking of what she thinks or knows, so before Superman arrives inside the jewelry store, we, the audience, see Clark running down an alley
Mm-hmm.
and then Superman running out. I mean, I don't know what do you make of that? I mean, obviously we'll get to the point in the episode where in the dream Superman reveals that he and Clark are one and the same. So do we just chalk this up to an early instance of Lois in her dream sorting this out?
Well, we have to assume that there are no interruptions. Everything is in her dream.
Oh, yes.
So,
Yeah.
So she must have this idea that he has to change somehow, and she happened to be right.
What I like too is that due to the times, I guess, they're not going to start making out, right? They're only going to go so far in terms of physical display of affection between the two of them. But I feel like they worked with what they had, and they got a lot of mileage out of her just touching the S on his chest, and it was romantic. Like, it was one of those things where sometimes, as they say, constraint makes the artist, and it's like they could only go so far. But I thought that worked to great effect, as small a gesture as it was, but it conveyed a lot.
And the fact that he just called her darling,
Yeah,
and you felt so much in that one word. And then when she called him dear, that was worth pages and pages of exposition just to hear them and feel them do that. And the fact that he just saved her life was inconsequential because he's done that countless times. And it was just like, again, such a payoff to this is what she really wants. She didn't need to be right. She just wanted to feel this. It didn't matter whether she was right, which I thought was a wonderfully mature way to depict her, that her deepest self, that's not what it was about. And the fact that she was even tipped off by the woman who had written the lovelorn letter in to her, and that's how Lois knew to go to the jewelry store, again, was her subconscious saying, well, these boys shut me out. But it turns out I was the most valuable player here, because I was already talking to the girlfriend of the main guy. And were it not for me, we wouldn't have cracked this case. So again, her mind was, don't shut me out. I'm valuable. And even when the scene where she arrives, she's in this powder blue, beautiful convertible, which, as we all know, Clark drives around in a really, really nice convertible. So does she have one in the continuity of the show, or did she imagine, now I'm equal to Clark, I have the physical acknowledgement of this beautiful car just like Clark, we're equals. So all of those little touches I thought were super well done, and by the time he saves her, that was just almost an automatic thing. You wanted to know what was going to happen next. And it had been a while in these color seasons where I've been wondering what's going to happen next. Some of these episodes in these later seasons are more passive, but this one really had me wondering, okay, this is territory we've not been in. What is going to happen next?
Yes. So, all right, I thought of a question, and this just came to me, so I'm still sorting it out, but very curious to get your take on this. I feel like there's a version of this episode that could have existed where it didn't need to be a dream. Now, we wouldn't have Superman revealing his secret identity, and we probably wouldn't go so far as a wedding ceremony. But you could envision some scenario where Superman solves a big case and finally feels like, okay, now this is actually something I can entertain, right? And maybe asks Lois out on a date, maybe doesn't propose marriage, but he asks her out on a date. And so it's like, wow, we're taking this huge step forward. And then something happens, like she's put in danger and he realizes, no, I can't go down this road. Right.
Mhm.
So you could have had a lot of the same beats. It wouldn't have been the wedding of Superman, but something along those lines where it's not a dream. Would that have been more valuable than what we got? Because part of me would have loved to just see this play out absent the dream sequence. But then on the other hand, that would have robbed it of this psychological aspect of learning what Lois thinks and feels and desires. And I feel like that's a big part of the magic of this episode. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
If I had to choose, I think I would keep this because it let us get all the way to their wedding day.
Yeah.
And it gave us what is now forever captured on film, that beautiful tender scene in the jewelry store. I would put it, and this is me talking, I would put it up there with Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder on the balcony on their first date, as far as chemistry.
Well, that's saying a lot coming from you.
I know. But as far as just rooting for their happiness, I would have a hard time knowing what story would top that if I had to give that part up.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think ultimately that's where I land, but it was just something I was kicking around. But yeah, I think I'm glad with what we got as well. At the planet, the men react to Lois's news. Henderson admits disappointment that Lois is now out of circulation. And Clark later gets very flustered when Lois asks him to be the best man at the wedding ceremony. Any thoughts on these reactions that we get? I mean, for me, certainly the Henderson one stood out the most. I know Perry also has a line about, if I were 20 years younger, and Jimmy
Right.
wants in on it too. He's like, I think you're pretty great too.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just anything that stood out to you about that.
Oh, yeah. Huge thought, because again, Lois, who was shut out of the boys club at the beginning of the episode, is now dreaming that they all love her.
Yeah.
Where did you look at Henderson's left hand in any of the scenes? He has a
No.
wedding ring.
Well, that's a problem because unless he remarried, because when we talked about the Talking Clue episode at the beginning of season 3, which dealt with his son, Ray, he talks about having to raise Ray alone because the mother died. So I don't know, maybe in between he remarried.
Either he remarried or the actor just forgot to remove his own.
Yes.
But in every scene of Henderson in this episode, he is married. So for him to be pouting in the chair, staring at the floor at the news that he has no shot with Lois now, is a head scratcher. But again, she's dreaming. So in her world, this makes up for the slight that happened at the beginning. If now they all love her, and even Jimmy just wants a kiss, and she feels better.
Yeah, the Henderson bit stood out, especially circling back to that opening scene of him and the good friends too, I hope.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Faraday hatches a plan to force Lois to marry him so she can't testify against him, even though at this point she is so happy that she actually forgets that Faraday is the big man. Faraday's accomplice poses as a color consultant and tells Lois she needs a flower from the Swiss Alps. Superman retrieves this at Lois's request, but returns before Faraday can force the justice of the peace to perform the wedding ceremony.
This is the only part where I went, no. And again, she's dreaming, but for a man to bring a gun and a justice of the peace and say, during the 2 minutes that Superman is flying to Switzerland and back, I at gunpoint am going to marry you. I in no way think that's legal. So for that to have been Faraday's plan, no.
No, and also the kicker for me was when he's talking to his accomplice about this, and he says well, once we're married, Superman will leave us alone. He's a gentleman. He wouldn't claim to have feelings for a married woman. It's like, come on.
Again, no.
Yeah, I
especially
agree.
because Superman has a nice little cabin on a mountain that solves some intermittent problems that arise in his
Exactly.
life.
Yep. It's getting crowded up there on Superman Mountain, but there's always room for one more. But yeah, no, that little bit there was a little silly, well, more than a little silly. Instead, Superman asks the Justice of the Peace to meet them later at Perry's office to perform their wedding ceremony. Lois expresses some doubt, though, questioning whether she might one day realize she really loves Clark. Superman explains that he and Clark are one and the same, which must remain their secret, and Lois is overjoyed. So we finally get this moment here.
We finally get it. And I love that she struggled. Again, her deepest heart, even in the midst of what she would think would be she gets it all, is the thought of, but what if one day I realize it's really Clark that I love? How real is that in Lois for it to raise itself to almost ruin the moment here?
Yeah, boy, we've gotten a lot of psychological mileage out of this, probably far more than they intended, but it's really fascinating. I'm with you. Okay, so again, he explains his secret. Lois is overjoyed. As the wedding ceremony begins, we hear ticking from the cake that Faraday supplied, but as it ticks, Lois wakes up to someone knocking on her door. Everyone in the crime ring has been caught, and Lois is needed to cover the story. Clark shows up, and she first addresses him as Superman, to his confusion. Brokenhearted to realize it was all a dream, she won't even look at the flowers she has received for real. So it is a very heartbreaking, bittersweet ending here. I really, to the credit of the show and Noel Neill in particular, I really felt that at the end there. I felt how disappointed and heartbroken she was.
Mm-hmm. And at first, I was going to nitpick. There's no way Superman would stand next to a ticking bomb and not hear it. Just like there's no way that he wouldn't notice the inside of this wedding cake is got some object covered in lead. And also, just like there's no way that that wedding party would accept a randomly beautifully sculpted wedding cake from a stranger. You would think they would already have had one. So what wedding accepts another one and doesn't think twice about it?
Well, in fairness, this came together real fast, so they might not be looking to give Taurus in the mouth.
But it was from a stranger, not someone who would have known the wedding was taking place. So I was just about to, figure out what's the no prize on that scenario. And then the thought occurred to me, this is now winding down to the end of the dream. And Lois's subconscious she's now at the altar. But I think she now realizes this is not real. So in a similar way to the Alan Moore story with the What to Get for the Man Who Has Everything, where Clark's subconscious, he's now on Krypton. He has everything. He has his relationship with his father, but it slowly starts to crumble as this is not real. This is not real. This is not real. We get to this part of Lois's dream, and she's at the altar. She's getting everything she wants, but something is now threatening to blow it up. It's the metaphor for the complete and total destruction of this life in this dream. So the fact that we hear this bomb ticking is more just, I think, a manifestation of in her dream, it's saying, we have to blow all of this up. You can't have it. It's going to be completely decimated. And the fact that it sort of ties into her morning alarm clock is a nice little smooth way of doing it. But I think it has sort of that deeper Freudian aspect of it had to be completely destroyed. And in an episode where already, criminals are just throwing sticks of dynamite willy-nilly on the floor whenever they just pull them out of their back pocket, I suppose. But in her dream, that's what happens. Things blow up.
Yeah, I love that analysis. Yeah. Now, I could probably guess the answer. Would you have sacrificed the couple of minutes about the color consultant and the Edelweiss and all that stuff to have seen more of the actual ceremony?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think they could have contrived another reason for Superman to have been gone besides the Edelweiss. And I would like to have seen more ceremony.
To be
more
honest,
reactions.
Honestly, I think you could have just cut it. It could have just been, you don't really need that. I mean, it could have just been that Faraday has his plan to, he knows that she knows, and he sends the bomb in the cake. I mean, I really feel like you could have, I don't know. I feel like we could have lost that bit in between.
Well, okay, that's a fantastic point because this idea that he's going to marry her at gunpoint and that that's going to work is a non-starter. It was the only point where I went, it's untenable here. Now, cut all of that, save all of that time, let the wedding proceed as normal, and Faraday is the guy who says, well, I've lost, but I'm going to do him real damage. He won't die from the bomb, but everyone he loves will.
Yeah. Any more of that sequence, I think, would have been great. And you know what's so funny? I feel like when I think of this episode, the image that comes to mind, and I feel like if you search, like what often comes up, right, is the wedding. I think in my head, I thought we got so much more of it. Mm-hmm. And you really don't.
No. But, oh man, you're making me want this now because I would have loved to have seen her. It looked like she was wearing, a fancy dress gown, but not a wedding veil with a long train. And I would have loved to have actually seen her walk down the aisle and seen Superman's face full of love as she walks towards him and seen, the fullness of it. But again, if her subconscious was going to blow it up, maybe it was that last bit of self-protectedness of let's not truly torture you about it. We'll give you the concept that you're going to get married, but all that to say, I'd still rather have seen it.
Yeah.
I would, in the way that we got it in the comics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it seems like other than the color consultant Swiss Alps bit, our biggest complaint is that we wanted more. Mm-hmm. And that's not bad. There are worse critiques to have. I think we just wanted to see more of this because we liked seeing this dynamic so much. Is there anything before we give our rating of the episode we didn't talk about in this one that you wanted to?
The Wizard of Oz vibe. So what I was really struck by is that this is the tragic version of that playing out. Whereas Dorothy got to be reunited with everyone she loved and everyone was fine. And she told them this amazing story. And you were there, and you were there, and you were there. What does Lois have? It's the Shakespearean Greek tragedy version of it. And audiences, clearly had been very used to the Wizard of Oz for 2 decades. And I have to believe that was intentional. And for one moment, I thought, I've seen some of the tropes of you open the flowers and like, oh, it really is from Superman. And the fact that they had the wherewithal to avoid that and sidestep it and have her not open it. And for her basically to say that my heart can't take even one more hit. This time when she had tears in her eyes, so did I.
Yeah. Who do you think the flowers were from at the end there for real?
I honestly do not know. Because the carnation on her desk, when Jimmy goes, well, maybe the cleaning lady left it. I don't buy that. So someone left her both the single carnation and sent her the box of flowers. I don't know that any of the boys were cognizant enough to have wanted to do that for her.
My money's on Henderson. I still think there was something in that opening scene there with good friends too. I think it might have been him, but that's the point. It doesn't matter, right? It's her reaction. It's her refusal to even open it. And I give the show a lot of credit because they could have softened this ending. I mean, there could have been something where it's off of the top of my head here. It's like, I don't know, maybe Clark asked her out, maybe even if it's not a romantic date, but something, right? Like, oh, maybe after we cover the story, we can go grab something to eat, something like that, right? They could have put something on it to soften it somewhat. And they didn't. And I do actually appreciate that because they let it end on this bittersweet note.
I do too. I appreciate that they made that call. I think it would have been an easy out to say, well, it's okay. She's not that sad. But to make us feel it was bold, and I give it full points that that's the way they went.
Well, speaking of points, the time has come now to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. Great Caesar's Ghosts. How many would you give The Wedding of Superman?
I have to take off half for the Edelweiss and the color consultant and the gun idea. But again, I think so much was given to us, just the depth of name another episode where we got to know a character this well and this deeply. So even if I were to take a full point for the plot missteps, I'd have to give half back for what it gave us. So 4.5 Caesar's Ghosts.
Okay. I'm there as well. I was also thinking 4.5. It doesn't hit a 5 for me, largely for the reason you cited and that we've been complaining about. But it's close. And I'll be honest, my opinion of it improved the more we talked about it and the deeper we got into the psychology of it, intended or otherwise. So yeah, 4.5 for me as well.
And Noelle's performance, just amazing. Just amazing. I think this would be an episode where if you had to justify your love of the show, and you say, but the acting, when given the moment, this would be one that you would highlight and say, watch this.
Yes, and then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll cut you loose. But on that note, I mean, it's been no secret that I preferred the Phyllis Coates version of Lois. But this is an episode that I feel like was really tailored for Noel Neill, and she rose to the occasion and gave a great performance. Similarly, it's no secret, the color era of the show is not my preferred version of Adventures of Superman. But this is an instance where you need this era of the show to do this episode. Like, this would not have worked in either of the first 2 seasons, definitely not the first season. And as opposed to other episodes that just feel like a watered down version of an episode that you can't do now because we can't be too gritty, this felt like something that you need this era to tell, and it has its place. So yeah, right on. Well,
I'll end by saying that I'm so glad that I got to rewatch this. And if Noelle were still with us, and if I would have ever gotten a chance to meet her, I think I would have started the conversation by saying, I loved this episode. You were amazing in it. This is one that just makes me feel like I wish that I could tell her.
Yeah, no, that's a lovely sentiment. I thank you, Daniel. I encourage everyone to follow you on Instagram at Wearing the Cape. Audience, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you come back next time. And until then, as always, remember, only Superman can do super things. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. Another way to support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, is by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please subscribe, rate, and review today via your podcast platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Flat Squirrel Podcasts is also home to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey, a long-running weekly series mining Superman's vast mythology across time and media. Subscribe today. Another exciting episode is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Greg Schiegel and theme music by Dan Pritchard.